This is the Norris Group's Real Estate Investor Radio Show, the award-winning show dedicated to thought leaders shaping the real estate industry and local experts revealing their insider tips to succeed in an ever-changing real estate market. Hosted by author, investor, and hard money lender, Bruce Norris.
We'll continue with the hard money conversation just for a second. We've had hard money loan business for a little over 20 years, and one of the things that we found, or actually was brought to the business from the gentleman that I was borrowing a lot of money from him, and I decided to open a hard money loan business, have him come to work for the company. But we don't take any broker referrals, which is interesting, because almost 100% of the problems come from that. So, you know, being in the business of teaching investors what to do has always been kind of the source of our deals. Is just people that we taught the business to come to us for their deals directly. So it's always been new loans directly to investors, never to anything to do with owner occupants, and never a broker referral ever. So it's just really interesting. Yeah, it's been a different.
Well, back in the 80s, I did owner occupants because we didn't have any laws that really thwarted us on that area. But as soon as the SAFE Acts and the Dodd-Franks and all of that came into play, especially in the early 90s and all, we had licensing laws for making loans to consumers in Georgia come into effect, but you had it a lot sooner, I believe, in California.
Well,
we quit dealing with owner occupants.
When I first got into the need for having money source, that was about 91 or 92 maybe, buying a lot of REOs and go to HUD auction, buy 10 houses. So I ran out of cash and personal credit line fairly quickly. Well, I never had heard of a hard money loan business. And I had a guy actually door knock a bunch of lenders, and he found this one where Craig was working for, and they lent 100% to owner occupants in second position. That was their business. And so here I am, an investor, saying, what would you loan me on the purchase of a home I bought, let's say REO? And so he was, check with his boss, and a 65%. Well, at the time, I was buying everything for 50% or less. So I was pretty excited about that. So first two sets of loan docs, and by the way, I had two of them I wanted to get funded that I had already just closed. And when the loan docs were ready, as I'm signing it, I said, does it bother you that you're loaning me more than I paid for the property? And he about had a heart attack. And he checked with his boss, and he said, well, it's still at 65%, so we're okay. Well, I could tell they were nervous. So I made six payments. I made 6 payments in advance on each loan. And I think the bell went off in their head. It's like, oh my gosh, this is not a typical hard money customer. And they gave me $1 million credit letter that I would take to HUD auctions. And the HUD auction actually would honor it. And every time I bought a house for like $60,000, they'd cross through the million and they'd write 940 left. And it made my buying life really easy. And I bet it did. And it opened up a whole new avenue for that lender, because they thought the investor was the riskier proposition than an owner occupant, and it isn't true. So that was how I got into the hard money loan business, actually by being a borrower, and then figuring out.
That's good.
Yeah, maybe I can source it as well. How did you get into teaching?
Well, I was president of a local real estate group right when I went full time doing the real estate, and I kept having people call me up and say, what about how can I use corporations? And we didn't have LLCs at that time, but they kept asking me about the entities. And I'd spend 30, 45 minutes on the phone talking to them and telling them there's more to it than that, but this is the basics. So I said, okay, maybe I'll just teach a little evening class. So I taught a 3-hour evening class and a Saturday class, and then a whole weekend class. And then I had another real estate group asked me down in Florida to come speak for them, and I went. And that's just kind of one thing led to the other. And I enjoy dealing with the people. I enjoy watching people light up when they realize they could do something that they didn't know how to do before. And that's just kind of since 1991. That's what I've been teaching. Teach about 4 or 5 weekend classes a year, and I might teach for somebody else a time or two. But other than that, I do my own real estate, my own hard money lending, and enjoy a little bit of semi-retirement.
I'm sort of on the same path. Aaron's done a lot of does a lot of the daily work and sort of do the investing. I'm still doing. Now, did you ever get into new home building?
When I took on some bars that built property, yes, I had to take over and finish out the houses a couple of times. But in general, no, I have not been a builder. Now, I've been a developer. I've developed a high-end subdivision over on Edisto Island in South Carolina.
Oh.
But I didn't build the houses. I just developed the property, which I found to be much more lucrative than the houses I built.
Which is, yeah, I guess you have to have some pricey land for that to be true. In California, it can certainly work, and sometimes.
Well, when you're on the water, it typically prices go up. Just to run a couple of numbers by you, this was late 90s that I did this. We bought a 13-acre tract of land for about $550,000, and then we had a few more $100,000 to develop it. And then we sold off the lots. The waterfront lots were $400,000 a piece, and the interior lots were $100,000. And we so with an investment of about $700,000 or $800,000, we had a total return in $2.4 million range.
That'll work.
Yeah,
that'll work. Now, in land, sometimes that it goes in reverse in California pretty strongly. So, in about 2004. I got a call from a friend of mine that was a builder. He didn't have the money for this deal, but he said it's probably the best deal he ever saw. 93 finished building lots in California for I think it was $275,000. $3,000 a finished building lot. And the story was there was a $3 million paper. The lender had lent them $3 million to create the subdivision. The bank went under when the paper went under. Then we had the crash. The note got sold for $100,000, and I was getting a chance to buy the 93 lots for $3,000 a lot, finished lot, street, sewers, and everything. But just think about the lender taking a $2.9 million hit on a $3 million loan. So land can go in reverse. That's for sure.
Certainly can. You got to be careful about that. I like income producing property to loan on or to buy myself.
Well, let's
as a matter of fact, a bunch of the lots that I still have came out of buying them at the high point back in 2006, 2007, and I'm still holding on to them. These are waterfront lots and all, but they're just not back up to the price I paid for them. So I do know what you mean.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about asset protection. First of all, what percentage of real estate investors have the protection that they need already in place, you think?
Hard question to answer. There's a lot of real estate investors that have a little bit of what they need done, but they haven't looked at their whole portfolio and their way of doing business and determined not only the best asset protection structure, but the best tax structure to have as well. And with knowledge of those two items, obviously asset protection protects what you already have. I like to think of it as ratcheting up so that you can't fall back too far. But by saving the taxes and structuring things properly for taxes, that's what the name of the game is. That's what we're doing. We're trying to build the assets up. A lot of those assets being dollars by the time that we want to retire or take it easier.
What are some of the most common liability issues that come up for investors that hold rental real estate? What causes them to get sued?
Well, tenants and contractors are the two biggies. And one thing that people shouldn't do is always represent themselves as the owner of the property when they deal with either tenants or potential tenants or contractors. You should always be a "they sent me" person. People deal with other W-2 employees deal with other W-2 employees better than they do with what they see as the big fat landlord, the owner of the property.
Okay.
So having the property in a land trust and maybe having an LLC as the beneficiary of the land trust, and this all is determined by particular situations. So there's not one size fits all. But a structure similar to that, or in the case of a flipper property, it might be an S corporation owning the property either directly or through a trust, and you be the employee of those entities, so that when you deal with a contractor, you are just the contract manager or the overseer for the work that's being done, and for the tenant, you're just the property manager. And it's always, you can't authorize a new ceiling fan. You got to talk to the office about it. Well, I could probably get back to you next week, which gets you away and gives you time to think, are they a good enough tenant? I think they'll be here long term. Did the fan really need to be changed or not? And then I can commiserate with them a week later when I call them and say, I really would like to have gotten that for you, but they're just saying that money's too tight right now and would have to raise your rent to put a fan in. I didn't think you'd want to agree to that. So, are you telling them a lie? No, you're not telling them a lie. You're acting in different capacities. You act as president of a company or the contracts manager of a company, and anytime you sign on behalf of the company, you show what your capacity is that you're signing in. So it's an effort to divide up the different capacities that you need to act in with property or with loans for that matter, and represent yourself as whatever the best structure is for that particular situation.
Do you find that certain types of properties lend themselves to more liability legally? Like being units?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what types are those?
Yeah, low-income properties, particularly low-income apartments, are highly bring a lot of liabilities with them. There's a lot of potential lawsuits that come out of those properties for one thing or another. You've got people that always feel like they're a victim. They're always watching the Saturday Night Late Show where the contingency fee personal injury attorneys are advertising. They're always thinking about how they can get something that somebody else has.
Okay.
The nice suburban single-family houses are probably the lowest on the liability scale. And then there's a lot of them in between the two ends. A lot of the investors, when they start out, want to start with the low cost property that might have fairly high rents coming in. They look at that ratio and say, wow, that'll help me grow real quick. What they don't take into consideration is those low-end properties typically have a lot more turnover, and when the turnover does occur, they usually have to put in, it might even be a new hot water tank because the old one kind of walked away with the last tenant, as well as carpet is dingy and it's got to be replaced and painting has to be done. So the key is to get a nice long-term tenant in a nice suburban property where you might have the same tenant for 4, 5, 6 years. The turnover is a key. So not only liability, but just your investment is determined by the kinds of property that you've got.
What role does liability insurance play in protecting our assets?
You should always have insurance, both liability insurance and hazard insurance. And with a rental property, that's a landlord policy. Or if it's a flipper property, the builder's risk policy, so that you can have that as your first line of defense in case somebody comes after you or there's a big loss that occurs on the property. So insurance is a cheap way of providing asset protection as a front line, because the best attorneys in the country are on retainer by the insurance companies.
I never thought of it that way, but you're right.
So having the structure using the corporations, the LLCs, the land trust, are a way to provide protection for you as a secondary fallback if insurance either doesn't cover all the claim that's made, or you happen to fall in one of the claim areas that the insurance companies decide that it did not insure you for, and so you have to defend yourself. Or if you have a problem with a tenant that goes beyond where the insurance comes into play. So you always need the entities, you need the asset protection, but the insurance policies are the first line of defense.
If you were taking a title to a property tomorrow, what would be the likely entity that the property would be deeded to?
Well, if I was taking a title now to a property, I would want to put it into a land trust. And then the beneficiary of that land trust might be me, but more likely is going to be an LLC if it's a long-term hold property, or an S corporation if it's going to be a flipper property, short-term hold property.
Okay. Do you have a favorite state to originate the LLC in?
I think that the first LLC that anybody should use comes from their own state. Now, there are strategies to use some other states like Nevada or Wyoming in particular for a particular reason. But in the beginning, I think you should start with your own state, because all intrastate strategies, interstate strategies, depend on that out-of-state entity dealing with an in-state entity, not with the public. Because if that out-of-state entity deals with the public in your state, every state has a requirement that they be that entity be filed with the state as a foreign entity,
right? Which
defeats most of the reasons that you have an out-of-state entity to start with. So the basic structure, you should have the LLCs or corporation for that matter in your state to start with. And then as you add to that, as you build structures, you may use those out-of-state entities.
What is an advantage an LLC has that, let's say, a C Corp does not?
Well, an LLC is a pass-through entity for tax purposes. So therefore, if you like that depreciation to offset other income taxes, then you want that to come through in its full amount. With a C corporation, for instance, it's its own taxpayer, so the depreciation stays in the C corporation. It doesn't come through to help offset income that you have in other areas on your personal tax return.
Okay. If for some reason I'm holding a property in a land trust with an LLC as beneficiary, and I get sued and I lose, does the LLC?
Well, now, first of all, you said you get sued and you lose. Well, what I think you might have meant was the property owner, which is the land trust, gets sued.
Yes,
and
correct.
All right. So the only asset of that land trust is that one property. If the property is free and clear, the land trust doesn't owe anything on the property, and somebody is able to get a judgment, they could possibly get that property, but they would not be able to come through to you personally because you were not named as a part of the suit. They would have to figure out and pierce the land trust in order to find out who the beneficiary was. And the beneficiary is an LLC. Now they got to try to puncture the LLC in order to get to you, who is the owner of the LLC. And to do that, they're going to have to show the court that you did not treat that LLC as separate from yourself. In other words, the LLC was just a incorporated pocketbook for you. That it had no separate existence. And that's kind of a hard thing for someone to do. Plus, a contingency fee attorney doesn't want to take all the extra time it would take to get the court to agree with them. So what we see a lot of times is if there is a suit and the dollars are relatively small, few thousand, tens of thousands, the judgment only gets in the name of the land trust. And if the land trust owes money on that property, in other words, the property is encumbered by a conventional loan, say, then that judgment is going to go behind the conventional loan. And the judgment holder is going to have to then petition the court to try to sell the property, which is another effort in itself. So if there's insurance, they usually take the low-hanging fruit, take whatever the insurance company offers, and they move on.
Now, what is a charging order? Is that somebody that wins?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, let's say that you and I own an LLC. We're the two owners of that LLC. And I hit the attorney in the crosswalk. He's a contingency fee attorney. He sues, and I was driving the vehicle, so he's going to get a judgment against me. So then he says, okay, how am I going to get paid on this judgment? He looks around. I don't have anything in my bank accounts. I'm retired. I'm not working. So what do I have? Well, I got this interest in this LLC that might own 1 or 5 or 10 properties along with you. And he says, well, I'd like to get into that LLC, sell one of those properties or 3 or 4 of those properties and get paid. Well, the court does not allow him in most cases to get into the LLC from the ownership side. That's where the court would give him a charging order. Charging order says, okay, manager of the LLC, if there's ever any distributions, then this judgment holder will get 1/2 of the distributions that would have normally gone to Dyches, and Bruce's part can still continue to go to him. So what they don't want to do is to affect the investment that we have between us by harming you at the same time they're trying to get paid from my judgment side. That's what a charging order really means. Some states have better laws on the charging order than other states. Again, if the suit is not a big suit, usually the insurance, whatever the insurance company is offering, is what they'll take, and they don't try to pursue the charging order, because typically, if you and I were running this and we know each other, wink, wink, let's don't do any distributions for a couple, 3 years, let's just keep reinvesting the money, then the charging order holder is not going to get any funds.
Okay. Interesting. Well, we are down to about 40 seconds. You have an August seminar that is covering this topic. Where is that? Where's that being done?
Yeah, August 17th and 18th, Saturday and Sunday, in Atlanta, near the airport. As a matter of fact, you don't even need to get a rental car or anything. They have a free shuttle going between the airport and the hotel. I'm going to be doing the land trust and also covering personal property trust. To a lesser extent, we'll be discussing some of the corporations and LLC issues that you might consider when you're holding property as well. But the main thrust is the land trust that can be used in any state of the U.S., including California. And we do already have some California people coming to that class. Pete Fortunato's already let me know that he's going to be coming to sit in on the class. And I don't know if you know, Lee Horner, attorney out of Phoenix, Arizona, is going to also be in attendance as well.
I think Aaron Norris is going to be there too.
Finally, I know.
That's right.
I'll be coming from our Florida trip, Dep, to you, so I'm ready.
All right.
All right.
Dyches, thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in September too.
Thank you very much. Okay. Appreciate the call.
All right. Our pleasure.
The Norris Group originates and services loans in California and Florida under California DRE License 012-19911, Florida Mortgage Lender License 1577, and NMLS License 1623669. For more information on hard money lending, go to thenorrisgroup.com and click the Hard Money tab.
For more information on hard money loans and upcoming events with the Norris Group, check out thenorrisgroup.com. For information on passive investing with trust deeds, visit tngtrustdeeds.com.